On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very special treat. She's a trailblazing, dynamic, badass entrepreneur and speaker. She's the co-founder of the innovative billion-dollar company Quest Nutrition and co-founder of the world-shaking impact theory, just to name a few. She empowers women to become the heroes of their own lives, and she leads by example by conquering a plethora of industries with a limitless mentality and beauty. She's a best-selling author, and her social media quotes will penetrate your soul, no big deal. She's all about healing yourself, emotional intelligence, and cultivating radical confidence. She's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the powerful, grateful, abundant, beautiful, and brilliant, charismatic Lisa Bilyeu. How you doing, Lisa?
Oh my God, that was amazing intro. And then just to throw on top of your beautiful hardcore New York accent, that was epic. I love your accent so much that I was just like...
I love yours. Talk about a tale of two accents. This is going to be too much fun. It's so funny because we connected obviously beforehand and we're about to go on a crazy rant. I was like, wait a minute, time out. Let's hit record and save this juicy stuff for the show. Like I was telling you, I'm such a fan of yours. The audience is in for such a treat. I imagine most of them are familiar. If you guys are not familiar, my suggestion, go do a deep dive. Check out her content, her book, her website, see what she's got going on, do all that stuff, play catch up. What I think is going to be most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me, Lisa?
Hell yeah, I love weird, dude. What
is your superpower?
Oh, being able to get back up when I fall to my knees.
All right, this is going to be great. I
was like, that's the first answer. Wow.
but like, spoiler alert for the audience, like life will hit you at some point. There's always going to be adversity and challenges. And I think like the real greats, the world shakers of legends like yourself, that's the big separator, right? You can take it and kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah. As I was writing my book, so we're talking earlier, I just released my book, first time author, very scary. And then you were telling me about yours, which is very exciting. In writing it, I was really like, I don't want to BS anyone. Like, that's not going to serve anyone anything. So how do I approach writing this book, and what are the things that are really important to say? And so I actually, one of my chapters, am I allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the chapters is when the shit hits the fan, wear goggles. And the point of that chapter is how many of us worry about, oh my God, what if the shit hits the fan? What if something goes wrong? And we spend so much time and energy worried about what if. And I've just embraced shit is going to hit the fan. I will fall to my knees. But what are you going to do? Wear goggles, protect yourself, and have a game plan on how you're going to get back up or how you're going to clean up the shit. Like, I'd rather spend more time and effort over there and embrace that failure or shit hitting the fan, whatever word you want to use, is part of the process. And so if you can just shift your mindset into that's part of the process, failing doesn't make you a failure. It means that you actually care enough about your life to go after it. Now we can actually start to take that step forward. So that's when you ask me, what's my superpower? I don't beat myself up. I am the person. I will keep falling to my knees. Every time I try something new, every time I attack anything, I will fail 100%. Now, I may fail 10 times, I may fail 100 times. I don't know, but you better believe I'm going to keep getting up when it's tied to a mission or something I'm passionate about.
I'm laughing because I just love you. This is awesome. I mean, and this is applicable and universal for anybody in any walk of life, right? Whether you got burned by a relationship, a business, you're running a marathon, whatever the case may be, like, it's going to happen, but you keep taking that shot. And really the only way you fail is if you stop.
Yeah. And I think that that's where people, they don't think of it like that because our egos are tied up into a failure, right? So we feel badly about ourselves when we fail. We think that means something negative about us. What are people going to think? Oh my God, I'm no good. So I'm not going to take another chance because I don't want people to perceive me as being a failure. Now that is your ego talking. Your ego wants to be stroked. Your ego wants to be cuddled. Your ego wants to feel good about itself. So of course it's going to be there to protect you. So I actually don't beat myself up over having an ego. I just don't allow my ego to dictate how I show up. And that is all by the mind, right? It is all by saying, I used to think failing meant I was a failure, but actually, going back to exactly what you just said, failing means that I'm trying something. I care so much about my life. I care so much about my dreams and my future that despite the fact that I'm going to fail, I'm going to keep trying. And we just got to shift that mindset into that, because I think so many of us are getting stuck in what I call purgatory of the mundane, where your life is just mundane enough. Someone asks you how you are and you say, fine. And because maybe you haven't hit rock bottom, because maybe something devastating hasn't happened to you, that you just live every day in what I call purgatory of the mundane. And to your point, that's where we get stuck. That's where we don't go after our lives or the dream that we have in our lives.
This is awesome. Everybody grab a journal and a pen and run that back. And it's so true, because I didn't necessarily hit like a rock bottom like a couple years back on Wall Street, but I was just like sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I needed to reinvent myself or die trying, right? And people always ask me, like, weren't you scared to start CLS? Like, you had 300 Instagram followers, like you had a stable job. And I said, yeah, I was a little scared, but I was petrified to make the choice to go back and choose to be miserable. And another thing is, you mentioned ego, and I know you love perspective, so you're gonna love this. Isn't it so fascinating? Like, if you just change your perspective with the ego, like, our ego stops us from like wanting to not look silly or not fail. But what if like we're all here to be abundant, meant to be a part of the infinite and achieve great things, and the ego is the one that's telling you like you don't deserve that. And if you just move that aside, your assignment is here to shine bright and do great things, because at the very least, you're going to inspire others that they too can do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think the only problem with that type of idea, because I'm always trying to like play devil's advocate with my own thinking as well, because that's how I live, right? It's like, well, you can't let your ego dictate. You have to keep showing up. Part of what I worry about, though, is if you're saying like you're here to impact others so they can impact, but what if that isn't your dream? Like I spent 8 years as a stay-at-home wife, supporting my husband. I was brought up very traditional Greek. So I, supported my husband. I was cooking for him. I was cleaning for him. And I didn't speak up that I was unhappy. I never told him that it wasn't the life that I dreamt of. I just every day kept doing it because I was getting the validation where everyone's like, oh my God, you're such a good Greek wife. But then to the point of like the deserving thing, right? Do you deserve more? And when I was trying to get out of that and get out of being a stay-at-home wife, and then actually started to go into my life, build quests and et cetera, where you find me now, I do worry now about the message that people are putting out, especially women, because you've got so many women that are all about entrepreneurship and equality, which I am. But at the same time, I never want a woman to feel badly if they choose to stay at home. Right? I don't want the flip side to happen where I'm standing here going, yes, go create impact, like pass that on, be a badass. And now you've got women who are like, but I don't want that life. I actually want to stay home, have a child, nurture that child, nurture my family. And so I'm very almost like a little cautious about telling people to go and create impact, because I don't want anyone to ever feel guilty about the life that they feel is right for them.
Fair enough. I love that other perspective, right? Because if somebody's dream is to just be the best wife and mother ever, then that's okay, right?
And you know how freaking hard that is as well? That's the thing, is that people perceive that as, oh, well, go and do this anyway. It's like, no, that is just as hard. You're now carrying a lot of stigma with you on that side of the world. And flash back 15 years ago, I was the person that I desperately wanted to get out. I told my husband I wanted 4 children. I decided I didn't want any children. And so it took me so long, Craig, to finally speak up because of the pressure that was happening in society about us judging people of whether, at the time we should be married and have kids. And now it's almost flipping. I'm very cautious about, and that's even what I say in my book, Radical Confidence. What life do you want? Forget about what life your parents tell you should have. Forget about the life that maybe you've just spent 15 years studying biomechanics, or whatever. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, I actually want to be a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
It's like, if that's the life you want, I'm not here to tell you, but how do you do it? How do you actually, you even said it earlier, right? The thing that was worse was going back, and I can't remember the exact words that you used, but that was like an emotional death for you.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's what we need to identify. What is the emotional death for the person listening? It's not my death. It's not your death. It's theirs. And now say, how do I pivot? What's that life I want? And start to come up with that plan.
Hell yeah. Right. And like, as long as you're fulfilling your assignment by whatever makes you happy and what your impact is in your opinion, then you should do that. But it seems like from you, and I've done my homework, of course, because a couple of reasons. I wanted to show this conversation the respect it deserves, but truly doing homework on you is the easiest thing ever because I'm such a fan. And I know you talk about your upbringing. It kind of caused your family, and don't quote me on this, but maybe play a little smaller, and it rubbed off on you. And you didn't maybe realize that, like, you had other choices, and then you did. You realized that you could push through and evolve. And like, when did it hit you that you have a choice? Like, you can do something significantly different than just kind of stay at home?
Okay, this is going to seem like a strange answer, but this is the truth. So on my very first date with Tom, I was 21 years old and I felt very secure. I was very secure in who I was. I knew I was Lisa Charalambus. That was, I was going to be a filmmaker. And we go on our first date. And one of the very first questions out of his mouth, so he was like, "Oh, you believe in God?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Greek Orthodox." He's like, "Oh, why do you believe in God?" I paused and I was like, because my dad told me to. Like, dude, that was my answer. I was 21 years old. I felt very secure and I had never questioned my belief. So that's where I wanted to start is we don't question our beliefs. We don't question the things that we think about because it's been passed on to us from generations.
Conditioning.
So yeah, conditioning. So now look, I don't blame my parents. That's what they knew based on their parents, based on their parents. And so I go, okay, it was the conditioning that I had from my dad because my dad grew up in a tiny village in the mountains of Cyprus. Okay, what does that look like? It meant that women weren't getting an education because there was no school in the village. Okay, women weren't getting an education and there was no contraception. So now women basically were getting married, having children, and that dictated the rest of their life. So my dad had that as that's what my daughters are going to end up having. And it wasn't malicious that he implanted that idea in me, but you better believe every which way growing up, I was being given that signal. So I fall on the floor, I scrape my knee, my yaya, my grandmother, she comes running over and she's like, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be okay by the time you get married." Like, right, as if marriage was going to be like the be all and end all of my life. My grandfather, on my wedding day, my grandfather calls me into his room to sit on his bed like the Godfather, the scene. I'm just waiting for the music to play over, and I come and sit down and he's like, "Okay, look, you're about to get married. I need to teach you the secret of marriage." Because at that point, he's been married to my grandmother for like 70 years because obviously divorce back then was never a thing. And his advice was obey your husband and everything's going to be okay. So now think about just that message over and over and over again. When you're a little girl, you've been told that in every which way. So flash forward, I have these big dreams about being a filmmaker. I meet Tom, we get married, and I fall into being a housewife. And that's why I started with the belief, because it never dawned on me over time that I wouldn't end up there. And so when it happened, even though it didn't resonate with me, even though I actually hated what I was doing, and I developed some very unhealthy habits to cope with the fact that I didn't like my life. And the unhealthy habits was body dysmorphia, running on the treadmill, counting calories, being obsessive about my weight and my looks. But that all stemmed from the fact that I wasn't living a life that I didn't realize I could question. Okay, so now how on earth do you, as a person maybe listening to this, recognize whether you're doing that? I've really struggled with this and I've thought through it. And the thing that I kept saying to myself during those 8 years, those two things actually. One was gratitude. I was using gratitude as a way to keep me going. And that can be beautiful, right? You even said earlier, perspective. So I was saying, well, you're not living the life you want, Lisa, but you have a roof over your head. You're grateful for that. You don't enjoy, cooking and cleaning, but you have a husband that loves you. Be grateful for that. And it was beautiful. It was filling my heart up. The problem was, Craig, in year 5, in year 6, in year 7, in year 8, that gratitude piece that was self-soothing, right, making me feel good, was now becoming a threatening. How ungratefully you. You want another life, but you have a husband that loves you. How ungratefully you. You want to go out and work when you already have a house over, a roof over your head. And now this gratitude piece became extremely toxic. So I want people right now to think through whether they're using gratitude as an amazing propel forward, or actually if that gratitude is holding them back from taking a step.
Wow, this is gripping stuff. And I've spoken to some of the world's greats. and I never heard it articulated like that. I want to acknowledge you. It's almost like you can use gratitude as a crutch and it can become a prison, right? Because you stay
1,000%.
where you are because you're supposed to be grateful for the things that you do have, right?
Yes. Why? Like, we all have been conditioned, all of us, and it's our own doing, but we've been conditioned that it's like, oh, if something's going great in your life, you can't ask for more, right? So it's like, oh, you've got an amazing financially successful business and you want a successful business? Well, God, that's greedy, right? We've all kind of perceived that as if one thing's going well, we can't ask. So the gratitude can absolutely stop you from wanting more or pushing to have more in an area of your life that doesn't actually feel aligned yet. We almost like ignore it. So that's one thing that I'd really love for people to assess if they're doing that. The other thing is, I want people to write down what their dream is, like what the goal they're trying to get to. Like, oh, I want to become this, I want to do this. And why aren't you doing it right now? A lot of people say, well, I'll do it when my kids go to college. I'll do it when I've got the money. I'll do it when I've got the time. I'll do it when I'm healthy, right? There's a million things of reasons that we give ourselves right now as people are listening. They've got that thing in their head. So now I want to propose a question. What if that when never happened? So if you say, I'm going to go after my dream, I'm going to travel when my kids leave my house. What if your kids never leave? What if you say, when my health gets better? Let's say you're struggling from health conditions. What if your health never gets better?
This is deep.
Would you keep waiting, right? That's the problem, is that so many of us, and I'm putting myself in this as well, I waited for 8 years for something else to happen to pull me out of the purgatory of the mundane. I waited for the confidence to speak up. But let's face it, confidence doesn't just appear like, like Santa Claus. Confidence, you have to build, you have to get competent, which means you have to take the first step, which means you have to be brave enough to be willing to fall on your face.
I want to interject for one second. I love this because something that I always preach, right? And it's like the perfect segue. You're asking, what if that when doesn't happen? And something I always ask my community and so forth is, what is the cost of inaction?
Exactly.
Yeah. And to
because
me,
we so focus on.
Yep.
I love that. That's so
cool. What were you about to say? We're so focused on what?
I don't even remember.
This is too good, but it's so true. Like, for everybody out there that wants to do something, but they're creating excuses or limitations as to why they're not. Like, we're not, spoiler alert, we're not going to be here forever. Forget about spirituality, like this physical vessel, right? Like, we don't get that back. And just like you, like, it took me a little while longer, but I believe life happens for us, not to us. It was the right time. But ultimately, well, that's a great thought-provoking question. What if that when doesn't happen? Are you okay with that? If you should be so lucky to grow older and get to 90, whatever the case may be, and look back, are you okay with, if that when never happened, you never took action? Would you be okay with that? And I asked myself this in the pandemic, if I didn't take this shot with CLS and I went back to Wall Street, and the answer was no. And so I took action. I took uncomfortable action.
That's amazing. And here's the thing. I bet up to that point, you'd given yourself every excuse, because you just said excuses. I love that word, because here's also the thing with the excuses. Sometimes they're very real, right? Sometimes so there's actually multiple things. One, there's excuses that we believe are real that aren't. And there's other ones that actually are very valid. And like, people would be so understanding if you were, God, I'm trying to think of an example. You went bankrupt because you started a business, right? And then let's say you've gone bankrupt, and I come to you and I'm like, all right, so what's your next business? And you're like, are you joking? Like, I've just been bankrupt. I lost my house. I'm on the verge of divorce because of my business. Of course, I'm not going to start another one. Right? You've almost got a very valid reason of why on earth you may now have gone to a 9 to 5, because you've been stung, and that reasoning is very valid. Like, it's very important. Now the question is, yes, it's a reason, but are you okay with it? Right? If you go back to a 9 to 5, back to your question, when you're on your deathbed at 95, are you going to be glad that you used the reason, excuse, whatever word you want to use, in not going after that dream again?
Yeah. For me, the answer is no.
Exactly. And I just think no one has to live their life based on what other people think.
Correct.
But just process it yourself so that you're okay with it, so that you don't get surprised, right? Like, what if you hadn't have done this? What if, you hadn't had that thought that, COVID didn't happen? Would you be here? Would you be in this situation now? Now, look, there's no guarantee of success. So I always want to make sure that when I use someone as an example like yourself of success, that people don't go into it thinking, well, okay, cool, that's what I'm going to do, because there's still the chance of not succeeding.
Sure.
And so that's why it's important to love what you do and have a mission, and every day be dedicated to that mission, because it's my husband's quote, but the success is never guaranteed, but the journey and the struggle is guaranteed. So you better enjoy what you do.
Bang. That's where we insert the Lisa Classic. Only you get to decide who you're going to become, no one else.
Yeah, exactly.
but I love that. And you know what? Like, that's a reality punch, right? Like, there's no guarantee that anything is going to work out. And even for me, like when I started CLS, like it looks like people say it happened so fast. Granted, I'm putting in a lot of hours and so forth. I love it. But I knew that there was no guarantee, but I knew that I was resourceful enough and not just interested, but committed, that even if I fell on my ass, I'd learn and I'd be able to apply that. But one thing that was a guarantee is that if I didn't take this shot, I'd regret it forever and I'd be miserable going back. And sometimes that's enough to just take that 20 seconds of courage and take some action.
Yeah, I love that. And then we get in our own heads where we kind of make up stories of like, well, I can't do that because if I fail, my life's over. No, your life isn't over. Actually process what the consequence would be if X, Y, and Z failed. So my husband, he was the one that came to me that it was him and his business partners, and they wanted to start a protein bar company. Now, long story, my husband had been chasing money for 8 years. That was me being the stay-at-home wife. He ended up being very miserable. I called him on it. I was like, I don't care about money. I just need my husband back. And so that was the pivot of, okay, if I was going to do something that I love every day, what would I do? And him and his business partners all collectively found their own selfish desires of why a protein bar was the answer. My husband very specifically did it because his family and my family have all struggled with weight, and he very specifically, his family's come from a morbidly obese. So for him, it's like, I think it's Mother Teresa that says no one will fight for the masses, but everyone will fight for the one. So my husband was like, I know I can get up every single day and help and fight for my mom and my sister. I can't necessarily fight for the world's obesity, right? You're going to get burned out. But every time I get up in the morning and I feel burnt out, I'm going to go back to that one person that is meaningful. So it's his mom and his sister. So when he came to me and he said, hey, I want to start a protein bar company, it was like, I could use every excuse or reason under the sun why that was a bad idea, right? Because we put our house up for collateral. So immediately I was like, well, we can't do that. We're going to lose the house. What if we lose the house? And my husband's very ambitious. So he's like, well, if we lose the house, like, what are you actually scared of? And that was like the pivot for me. It's like, oh, what am I actually scared of? Like, actually write down, what am I worried about? Losing the house? Okay. Yes, that's very possible. But if I don't, my husband is miserable. I could lose my husband. I can get another house. I can't get another Tom. So I was like, okay, having a supportive partner to me is way more important than a freaking house. All right, great. I've now written that down. I've like articulated it. I've said the words. Okay, there. Then it's, well, I don't, where am I going to sleep? I need a roof over my head. All right, Lisa, actually process that. Are you really going to be homeless? Now, look, it is horrifying how many people are homeless, and it breaks my heart. But the truth is, if I really dug deep, I would never be homeless. I have family. I could fly back to England. I could live with them. Tom has friends. We have people in LA. So the truth of me saying, well, I need a roof over my head, it was an excuse, because the truth was I could still have a roof over my head. And so what I would do is I started going down all the excuses that I really thought were reasons to say no to him. And I just debunked them all one by one. I was like, oh, husband's more important than the house. That's an easy one. Oh, I actually can have a roof over my head. I'm not going to starve. The truth is, I won't starve. I've lived off pot noodles. I was a student, right? It's like, and I know that, again, even that, if I needed money for pot noodles, I can absolutely, I've got people in my life that I can reach out to. So once I started putting words and basically a sledgehammer to every excuse I was bringing up of why we shouldn't start Quest Nutrition, it ended up being easy. I was like, oh, yeah, we should start it. And because of that, we grew at 57,000% and went from $0 to $1 billion in 5 years.
No big deal. But I don't know why, Lisa, first of all, I have like a dopamine hit right now. I'm like high on life speaking to you. I just got as emotional as I've ever gotten on our show since I started it. Because when you, first of all, two things. One, I'm engaged and I never
Hmm.
settled, thank God. And I finally found the one. And I know what you mean when you say you have that supportive rock, right? And for anyone out there that's listening that's single, perfectly okay. Great time of your life. Never settle. But if you are fortunate enough to find that one person, it really does add like another layer of confidence, of self-belief. So just touched me. And then also, when you were talking about the sledgehammer to the excuses, it makes me think like anybody, and a lot of entrepreneurs listen to the show, like if you want something bad enough, you can make it happen, right? And if you break it down and make it practical, like Lisa just described, like, okay, we're not literally going to be on the street because we know people and we have family, whatever the case may be. Then all of a sudden, it's like instead of thinking about everything that can go wrong, you're not available for that anymore. You're only available for, well, what can go right? Right. And you start
Hmm.
taking that mentality and you start chipping away. I believe so many more people can do such special things. And I love that you and Tom broke it down to that and made it very practical. And it just really moved me the way you were telling the story too.
Oh, thank you. And it's basically something we call no bullshit. What would it take? So a lot of people will say, right? I don't know why I always use this, but like I was watching The Notebook with my husband, and there's a scene where they're playing the
Classic.
piano. Yeah, I was playing the piano, and I've just got like such love for musical instruments. I find them just very beautiful. And so anyway, as the scene's playing, I was like, oh, I was like, I wish I could play the piano. And my husband turns around to me, and this was like 5 years ago, so it's not like I'm spring chicken. He turns around to me and he looks at me and he's like, "Isn't it great, babe, to think that you could be the best in the world at the piano if you chose to?" And I just for a beat looked in and I was like, you're right. And that is the perfect example of why so many people don't go after what they want because they don't play no bullshit. What would it take? So if I was to sit here and say, you know what, I've decided I want to be the best pianist in the world, or one of them, one of the top, and I want to play in the Disney Music Hall in Los Angeles. All right, cool. No bullshit. What would it actually take? Seeing that the fact I can't even read I can't read music sheets. I would have to lay out. Okay, you'd have to read music sheets. Who's the best in the world? How many hours did they practice? Choose the best. Maybe they started when they were 8 years old. So you predict. Okay, I'm going to have to do 50,000 hours of the piano before I can even get good enough to play at a school fair. Let's just say, great. Do I want to not go on vacation with my husband? Do I want to not go on date nights? Do I never want to travel for 5 years because I have to put in the 50,000 of hours? People say like, oh, well, I don't have the money. Okay, well, someone might say, I need a piano because I can't practice off a keyboard. Cool. Where do you live? Move into a different neighborhood. Get 5 roommates in a studio apartment. You're going to be able to afford it. But no bullshit. So that's the no bullshit. That's what it would take to become the best pianist. Now what you can do is say, is that the life I want? Because now what it does is it frees you of all the excuses.
Yep.
And now what you do is I can literally, with good conscience and pride, say, I choose not to play the piano because I've played no bullshit. What would it take? I realize it's not the actual life that I want. And now I've let go of the dream with no judgment as if that is a reflection of whether I'm capable or not. No, I am capable. I've just chosen not to get capable. And that's a very empowering mindset to me.
This is unbelievable. And to be honest with you, I'm taking notes myself. No bullshit exercise. I'll forever think of you. And
Huh.
it's absolutely genius, especially when you're really trying to help someone pursue their dreams, right? Break it down to what it would actually take step by step. Yes, there's going to be sacrifice, but this is how it's achievable. And then now that you know that, do you want to go for it? Brilliant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tom and I, when we play that game, and every time we come up with a new idea, or I call myself out on my own shit because I realize I give myself excuses as well. You know, you're only human, but I always have the antidote of that, and the antidote of excuses is no bullshit. What would it take?
Yeah, what I love about Tom, based upon the way you're describing him, and I kind of have this too. He, correct me if I'm wrong, he's like a little bit like delusionally optimistic. Like he doesn't believe, but I mean that in the best way possible
Yeah.
because so am I. Because I don't believe. Why should you ever be realistic? Like I ran the Chicago Marathon last month, and I had a really audacious goal, and I came up a little short. But because the goal was so audacious, I still ran faster than I ever ran in my life by a long shot. But if I set a realistic goal and I came up short, I would have been like 30 minutes behind that. So why be realistic? And also, when you have that strategy where you can literally break it down and then you can kind of see with the naked eye, no, this is how it's achievable. Awesome stuff.
I think the reason why people say let's be realistic is so that they can set themselves up for success. And they're like, oh, well, if you put the bar low, I can get past that bar. So now I'm going to feel good about myself. So you put the realistic, quote unquote, at a lower bar. And the people who, to your very brilliant point, is when you're audacious in your goal, what you're doing is you may not get there, but because you're the type of person that doesn't get dented or emotionally hurt or stung by the fact that you don't get there, it only propels you forward. But there are some people where if they don't get there, they think of it as a reflection of their capability. It means that they're no good. And so I'm not going to try again. And so for the same tactic with a different person, if they think differently, it can absolutely be detrimental to them ever starting anything. But someone like yourself, someone like me, someone like my husband who has a growth mindset actually just sees, oh, I was so close. I was so close. Next time I'm going to do it, right? And you use that as the enticement and the empowerment to then next time, like, but next time. And so I think when it comes to mindset, I'm always trying to talk of, if it propels you forward, amazing. If it doesn't serve you, you need to reassess. And so that's a question I ask myself a lot, because I have a very negative mindset all the time telling me that I'm no good. And so I used to listen to it. And now I say, does this way of thinking serve you? Does this way of thinking serve the goal? And when I know my goal and my mission, and I'm so freaking grounded in my mission, I can very easily say, no, this way of thinking doesn't serve me. So I go, cool, don't beat yourself up. But how are you going to pivot that thinking so it does serve you?
There's so much alignment here that it's freaky, because I just started doing that too. And I make a choice every day, like what I'm available for. And I'm no longer available for the negative chit chat or the disempowering thoughts. I hear it, I acknowledge it, and not available. I'm only available for, how can we problem solve here? What could go right? How can we expand this? How can we hit this goal, and so forth? And every day, and nobody's exempt from getting some negative thoughts, but it's, how do you handle those? Do you have a strategy? How do you block out the interference? What are you available for? And that's really the big separator.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that actually held me back for so long, for the 8 years, was I had such a negative mind, right? It was like, you're no good. Who's going to think you're, who do you think you are? All of the negativity, and it held me back. And then over time, it was like, it was so crippling. And I do like to talk in superhero terms. So it was like my kryptonite, right? It was really holding me back from doing anything amazing. And once I realized that was thing, right? Acknowledgement and realization is such a powerful thing. Once I realized it was my kryptonite and it wasn't serving what I was trying to do, I just asked myself, what would it look like if I was to spin it and it's the opposite? So I couldn't stop the negative chatter. I don't know about you. Some people are like, oh, speak nice to yourself. It's like, it's easy to say it, but my mind doesn't want to go there. Like, I call her the bitch in my head. The bitch in my head is mean, and she doesn't want to go. She's got a full-time membership to my brain. And so, and so every time she speaks, I would feel badly about myself. I then tried to change that language, because I couldn't change that language. I was beating myself up even more, right? Because now I'm like, oh, you're so bad, you can't even stop your own self from talking shit to yourself. So then I said, what would it look like if the kryptonite was my superpower? Like, flip it. What would that actually look like? So I started to think about like the bitch in my head. What if she was my best friend? That's kind of the reverse, right? So I call her the bitch in my head. What if she was my BFF? Exactly. Perspective. Kryptonite, superpower, bitch, BFF. So I was like, okay, what would that look like? And I was just grasping at straws quick, because I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, out of panic that my mindset and negative unworthiness would hold me back for the rest of my life, I just literally gripped at whatever I could. So I said, okay, if my husband comes up, and if your fiance comes up to you, right, and says, you told me you want X, Y, and Z. Let's say you tell me one of your dreams, if you don't mind sharing.
Sell at a stadium in front of 100,000 people, speaking about personal development.
Okay, great. So let's say you tell your fiance this is your goal, and weekend after weekend after weekend, you just sit on the couch and you don't do anything, and you stop work at 5 p.m. every day, and you're always very negative. And she goes, because I love him, his actions aren't in line with the goals he said that he wants. And because I love him, I'm going to be honest with him. And I'm going to pull him aside and say, look, babe, because I love you so much and you've told me your dream is to have a sellout a stadium with 100,000 people, right now your actions may not be aligned, and the way that you're going, you may not get there. But because I care about you and I just want to help you, I want to bring this to your attention, right? There are ways that it's not nice to hear that basically she's saying, get off your ass, right? And like, keep working, get off your ass and think positive, right? That's basically what she's saying in a very kind and generous way. But she's helping identify the parts of where you're not showing up. And so what I started to realize was, if I start to listen to the negative voice in my head, so this is a real example, getting in front of the camera. I never wanted to get in front of the camera. I was teased as a kid. So I was like, why the hell would I ever voluntarily do something that allows people to pick on me and be cruel to me? I was like, why would I ever do it? And my husband basically was very kind and said, hey, just so you know, you're not acting in accordance with the fact that you want to empower women. So by not getting in front of the camera, you're not living out your dream. Okay, great. Now I've identified my action. And then I said, but my mindset still is holding me back. How do I now make her my best friend? So I said, okay, what am I actually worried about, right? The ego, again, it's telling you something. And the ego was saying, Lisa, what if you stutter? Lisa, what if you're not as good as Tom? Lisa, what if you fidget? Lisa, what if you forget shit? Lisa, what if you freeze, right? And I'm just like, all right, just let her talk. Just she's your best friend, Lisa. Put an arm around her, right? You're cuddling her. Let her just speak without defense. And I got my arm up as if I'm actually cuddling my my negative voice, right? And I would just let her talk, because I actually greeted her, and I would write down all these things. What if you fidget? What if you're unprepared? What if you freeze? How are you going to end the episode if you're interviewing someone? And now I go, okay, she's my best friend. She's actually warning me. And the truth is that I would probably forget things. I have never been in front of the camera before. It's very possible I will freeze. And so she's actually just helping me come up with a game plan for when this happens. What am I going to do? That became the most powerful thing I ever did. And so now every single time, so let's go to a book. Every single time she speaks, I listen. A year ago, a literary agent reached out and said to my husband, would Lisa be interested in writing a book? And my husband comes to me and he's like, Lisa, babe, I can't believe someone, she's just reached out, and do you want to write a book? And I was like, oh, that's nice. And I just went back to work. He's like, no, babe, you actually have to take this seriously. This is a very big agent that has offered a book deal. And the first was out of my mouth, Craig, this is after I built a $1 billion company. This is after I built Impact Theory that has 500 million views on our content. The very first words out of my mouth was, well, babe, who would buy a book from me? That's the negativity, right? That's the mind. That's the insecurity. That's the bitch in my head. And so instead of shutting her down, which I used to do, immediately I was like, oh, she's trying to tell me something. Okay, what are you trying to tell me? Lisa, you've never written a book before. She's right. I've never written a book before. So what am I going to do? I'm going to call up all of my friends who are amazing, who have written #1 New York Times bestsellers. And I'm just going to call them up and I'm going to be the student, because she's right. If you go in thinking you know how to write a book, you're going to fail. So she's there to help protect you. All right, what else is she saying? Lisa, what if the book tanks? All right, are you going to feel badly about yourself? How do I mitigate that? I have to create validation within myself that even if the book tanks, I've already done the internal work to not then feel like that's a example of my worth, because that's another thing. We all want to feel worthy. And so again, you can see how in just those little examples, I took the negative voice that used to petrify me, that would stop me from stepping in front of the camera, that never would have written the book. I used it as my coach. And in fact, this is the final piece, is I've taken the critic in my head and I've made her my coach.
Bang. First of all, only negative I got going on is we don't have 10 hours to chat, but I think it's just the beginning of the and we're definitely going to have you back for a sequel. But that's like a cheat. Wow. That's like a cheat code to never be defeated, because if the voice in your head can be transformed into an asset, I mean, what else can get you? And also, I got to bring out one of the other Lisa hits now. The conversation that we just had reminds me of something that you talk about often, where tough conversations are inevitable. You might as well get good at them. And I love that you said that. And the way you just described it is exactly how you can handle one of those.
Yeah, exactly. It's always the tough conversations that you hate having, but that lead to clarity, communication. I mean, that goes for relationships, especially in relationships, Jesus, but business and everything. So
Yeah, and also you feel liberated after. Like you feel like, oof, like we needed to have that conversation.
yeah, 100%. And that goes to another chapter in my book, which is open the can of worms and embrace the ick. The can of worms are the hard questions. And the reason why we don't want to ask hard questions or have the hard conversations is then you have to embrace all the crap that comes with that. So let's say, for instance, you're in a relationship and one of the hard questions is, am I actually happy in this relationship? Right? Maybe that's been like that little whisper in your head where you're like a little unhappy, but you don't ask yourself the question, because what if the answer is yes? What if you say, am I happy in this relationship? And you answer yes. Then the ick, right? All the crap that comes with it is, well, am I willing to work on this relationship? Is my partner willing to work on this relationship? Do we need to go to therapy? What if we get divorced? Who gets the house? Who gets the kids at Christmas? Am I going to die alone? Right? Like all these all these things, the shit that comes with asking this hard question. I understand why now as humans, we don't want to ask the hard question. And so that's why, going back to like, I take each chapter of my book and I really do address all the stuff that holds us back that we think is good, right? Not asking the hard question. I don't think we process through why we don't. We just like, oh, that's too difficult. Ignore that, ignore that, ignore that. And as you know, and most people do, when you ignore something long enough, it's going to come and slap you in the face, whether you like it or not.
100%. And it'll be 10 times worse than if you had dealt with it in the beginning. I got to ask you, and obviously, of course, we were going to segue into this, but we're just having so much fun. The book, right? Based upon how you describe yourself from your upbringing, it seems like you didn't always have a ton of confidence. In fact, confidence is something that everybody needs to work on all the time, even the all-time greats. So why radical confidence, and what exactly does that mean to you?
Yeah, thank you. And this was one of these, when they came up to offer me about the book, I was like, well, who would buy a book from me? And so then it became like this weird inception where I was like, okay, well, this is who you are, Lisa. You always have doubt. You're always petrified. You're always negative about things, but you never stay there. And so how do I actually, like the inception part, right? Like I was writing the book as I was actually following my own advice. And so that's really important. And the reason why I called it radical confidence was because everyone was like, just so confident, because they see me now. And you said it earlier, right? People are just like, oh, overnight success. It's like 20 years in the making is the truth.
Right.
So, you know, how, you know, I like to, one of my favorite movies is The Karate Kid, right? The wax on, wax off.
Awesome.
It's like no one's been seeing the amount of times you've painted the fence, waxed the cars. All they see is you with your karate kick
Right.
in the finals. And they're like, oh my God, they learned how to karate kick. It's like,
They don't see all
no,
the
it's just,
reps, baby.
yeah, they don't see the reps, the splinters that you get, all the crap that comes with doing the reps. And so I realized it was a massive disservice for me to step in front of the camera and into the limelight, if you will, and pretend it was natural. I was like, homie, this shit's hard. I wake up every single day with these tactics. And that's why I called it like the 10 no BS lessons of becoming the hero of your own life, because I'm not here to sugarcoat. That won't help anyone. I'm here to say it's an evolution. I still use my own tips because I'm still finding myself in many times coming out with things where I feel insecure, where I don't feel worthy, where I, you know, have the imposter syndrome. The only difference is that I don't stay there. And so that's why I called it radical confidence, because radical confidence means to me is that you have the fear, you have the insecurity, you have the doubt, you have all the shit that comes with all of that. And yet you're willing to put a game plan together in order to take action. And I used to say, my message was, but you do it anyway. And I realized, fuck, people, that isn't true. It's not like, oh, just do it anyway. No, you have to create a game plan to then do it anyway, because you better believe every day I wake up, the negative voice is there ready to hold me back. And so I need the game plan that I use in order to counteract the negativity that I have. And I've just admitted that I'm an emotional woman. That's me. I'm emotional. I get in my own head. I think that I'm crap. I have a very negative self voice. And so because of that, I have to come up with ways that I don't get in my own way. I'm a person that I could lick my wounds. I could say it's not fair. And that I've seen where that leads me. 8 years of profound unhappiness. And so that's why I found it important to write the book Radical Confidence. I found it very important to tell people who you are today does not dictate the person you can become. But by golly, it's going to be freaking hard, and that's why you better absolutely love the direction and like call your freaking shot, whatever that shot is. But it has to be your shot, because you're never going to succeed if it's someone else's dream, someone else's life, or someone else's vision of what your life should be.
You're such a beautiful soul. You really are on fire. But I love everything about this. And it's one thing to have confidence, right? But when you deal with those negative thoughts, like, oh, I'll do it anyway. No, but you have to have a system in place. But how, right? And you just nailed it. And one of my favorite quotes of yours is, who you are today is not a reflection of who you can become. And I think that's just the most powerful thing, because like, I'm always evolving and stuff, and the messages change, of course, but the core message of what we do is reinvention. That's what I did. I had one life for 13 years and I reinvented it and had success. So even if you didn't like me, if I wasn't your cup of tea, one thing that you couldn't deny is that I'm an expert in reinvention. And I think that's so powerful the way you describe it, because so many people are unhappy or unfulfilled, or don't think that, or they think it's too late, right? Or it's never going to work out for them. But who you are today is not a life sentence if you buy into this stuff, but more specifically, if you can cultivate radical confidence.
Hell yeah. And it's never too late. Like, that's the one thing I want to poke my own eye out when someone says, oh, it's too late, because it's like, oh God, the only thing right now you're suffering from is a unhealthy mindset. That is it. It is not age. It is not ability. It's like, yeah, you may not know anything, but you can learn. Like, that's it. You can learn. And that was one of the things that my husband taught me, that I use as a female in business. I'm not sure how many female business owners you have listening, but that was another thing where once I started to adapt my identity, because identity, I think, is something that we all really hold on to, and it can be very detrimental to us. And so, especially going from the stay-at-home wife, I then immediately entered a growing company, just crazy growth. I was the Greek one. So, oh, babe, how can I help you? And it went from how can I help you to now I was running an entire department that I built from scratch, from shipping bars from my living room floor to literally 40 employees underneath me with 10,000 square foot of shipping department space, where we were doing $80 million in revenue. I mean, it's just insane with someone that doesn't have experience like myself. And so every day I was petrified. Every day I was very insecure. And that insecurity would obviously lead into the actions and how I felt about myself. And once I realized that if I adopt the identity of the learner, there was nothing that feared me anymore. So I was now walking into boardrooms where there were, my husband and these other two very seasoned entrepreneurs. Once upon a time, I was that person that was sitting on the side, right? There's like 10 seats at the table and I sit on the side, and I'm just like quietly like trying to shrink into my chair, like slowly, so that no one notices me. I went from that because I was so embarrassed. I didn't want someone to think less of me. I felt like the imposter syndrome. Who am I to be in a business meeting with these guys? To then, once I adopted the mindset of being the learner, I was like, oh, well, if asking questions is how I'm going to learn. And now I'm not going to be fearful of walking into that room. So as I was starting to walk into rooms more and more, I was like, oh, what can I learn? And that imposter syndrome went out the window. And I was now walking into these rooms with excitement, with enthusiasm. I was the one, if you could have the students sitting at the front with their hand up, that became me, because I no longer was intimidated by seasoned entrepreneurs. I was no longer intimidated by the physicality of these men, because I'm 5'1" and these guys are, 6 foot. And whether I like it or not, that was intimidating for me. And so that didn't serve me either. And so how I got through all of that literally was by adopting the identity of the learner. Because now I could be proud of, I went into this meeting, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just freaking learned about P&L. Oh my God, that's amazing. And now I can actually walk into a meeting and talk about bloody P&L. So anyone that's worried, nervous, imposter syndrome, ask yourself if I'm the learner, and then, or tell yourself that you're the learner. And then I hope, like me, it will help you walk into any situation.
That's such a paradigm shift, because essentially it's like when I started studying NLP, it reminds me of an exercise. Like you changed what you associate pain and pleasure to, right? So instead of associating pain with not knowing, you took the approach, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm going to associate pleasure with wanting to find out. And then all of a sudden you
Yes.
go from scared to walk into the room because you think that you know the least to the most excited to walk into the room.
Exactly, exactly. And now that thirst of learning makes you speak up more, which then leads into you understanding more, which makes you more freaking powerful. And that was one thing that I always said to myself, no one can take my knowledge away. So you better get knowledgeable, like, period. Like, that was how I spoke to myself. It's not someone else's responsibility. It's not my husband's. It's not my parents. It's not anybody else's. And that's also the last thing, is like, what variable can you control? You. That's the variable you can control. Do you control you showing up every day, walking into that room or not walking into that room, reading that book or not reading that book, speaking about the hard thing or not speaking about the hard thing? I can control all of those elements.
That's it. We'll land the plane with this final nugget. Short answer. What is the biggest challenge of building an empire with your partner or significant other?
Oh, I mean, not getting divorced. That's the biggest challenge, right? And what I mean, that, and this sadly isn't a quick answer, so you're just gonna have to interrupt me when you need me to stop talking.
As long as you have a couple more minutes, I'm good.
Yeah, no, I do. I can. This is so important. That is the biggest challenge, right? Is that you both want to build a successful business and you both want to build a successful relationship. And that's the challenge. So now the question is, do you both have the same goal? Because one of you may prioritize the business and the other person may prioritize the relationship. So you have to very first identify what you prioritize. And when I say prioritize, I don't actually mean waking hours. I just mean, like, because the truth is we prioritize our hours to our business. But if they ever came into conflict, if it was, oh my God, your business is about to burn, or holy shit, you're about to get a divorce, it's so easy for us to go, well, of course our marriage is more important. And so that's a big key, is identifying both of your importance. And then I don't know if you've read Rocket Fuel.
No, but I heard good things.
It's so good. So my husband has a different type of analogy where it's like, who's the kite and who's the string? Because you're going to have, and that's really pretty much what the rocket fuel is about. You've got one of the shiny, the thing that everyone wants to be, the kite, the thing that flies, the rocket, the thing everyone looks up to. But the other thing that actually makes it move, right? So you've got the fuel in the rocket that then helps the rocket. Otherwise, the rocket is useless without the fuel. So who is the rocket? Who is the fuel? Or who is the string and who is the kite? Who's the person that's going to be grounded and who's the visionary? If you've got two freaking kites, you ain't going to work. You've got two freaking rockets, right? So in a partnership, if you're working with your business partner and they're your romantic partner, you must establish that from the get-go, because then that determines who makes decisions, what departments you oversee. And then the last thing is, in a relationship, when it comes to business, is we make sure that we say who has the credibility in this department. So we've divided up our own company. I have credibility in the content space, in YouTube, in content creation. The set building is all me. And my husband is the one that came in and was like, I want neon lights. And I'm going to be, the number one interviewer in the world. And he's the one that just fucking goes and, like, has the vision, points the shot and gets there. So as a team, we make amazing team, but we know our lane.
Yeah, that's huge.
And it's like, anytime there's a conflict, especially when you're in a partnership in business with your partner, you can get stalled out. It can become personal very quickly if you disagree.
Yep.
Now, what that does is that will screw up your business and screw up your relationship. So we just said, before we ever got there, okay, what lane's mine? What lane's yours? Who has credibility in which space? And then who has final decision? So if my husband comes in and he starts to dictate about YouTube, podcast, sets, production, and he's like, this is what we need to do. And I'm like, no, I disagree. He has to persuade me. And we've established that from the get-go because it's my credibility. So he has to persuade me. If he can't persuade me, we have pinky swore that I have the right to say, I disagree. We're going to go with my idea. Now, in part of that pinky swear, as a response, the person on the other side must say, I still disagree, but I commit. Ooh. Now, that's the key thing, because any partnership, whether it's a romantic partnership, whether it's a business partnership, whether it's both, you're playing the same game and you both want to win together. And so many partnerships, whether it's business or whether it's romantic, they play it like it's a game of tennis, but a game of singles. You're on one side of the net, your partner's on the other side of the net, and you bounce the ball back and forward. But the truth is, right, Craig, only one person can win that game.
That's right.
But now, if you decide I'm playing a game of doubles, he's on the same side of the net as me. If he wins, I win. If he
Same
loses,
team.
I lose. Exactly. And so now, whether it's business or whether it's personal, you just have to decide what type of tennis match you're playing. And if you decide it's doubles, now you know, even if you disagree with the person that's making the decision, I want you to win. So I'm not going to be there that's on the corner that's like just waiting for you to fail, right? You know, those partners that are just waiting for you to fail. And then when you fail, you're like, see, I told you so. That will never last. Your relationship will fail. Your business will fail if that's the type of partnership you have. So if you just agree from the get-go that your type of partnership that you want is a game of doubles where you win, I fail, you fail. That's that. And then if I disagree, because we so want to win the game together, you actually are committed to it. And that means that you don't have ill will that you want it to fail, because if you fail, I fail.
This is awesome. I'm putting the attention out. We're going to get you back for a sequel and talk all things relationship. But that was really key.
Let's do it.
Basically negotiating the price in advance, like identifying, I don't want to say roles because it sounds a little icky, but like everybody has like a section that they run, right? And
Can I just say roles, Craig?
Okay,
Why is it icky? Let's just say freaking roles, because I don't think it means a bad thing.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I don't mean to like put you in an awkward position, but like I just think, yeah.
I'm glad that you did chime in. I prefer that as well. Each person has a role, and then they own that. And now there's an understanding before it even begins. So you're basically getting out ahead of all the potential obstacle and adversity, because at the end of the day, we're on the same team.
Exactly. Having that discussion up front, and then, you know, with roles, I just think it's like, hey, absolutely, you should know what your responsibility is, how you're expected to show up. And that's like in a relationship. Like me and my husband absolutely let each other know the type of thing that we want in a partner. And, you know, whether people like it or not, I'm always very honest on like the role is, if someone's breaking into my house, you better believe I'm looking at my husband to go and, you know, like protect me. And so I have zero problem in saying roles in a relationship or roles in a business. I think it becomes, it's clarity for me. Now, other people may not agree, but if you can have clarity, that's the key. And then use whatever word you want, but that's important. And if you don't identify what your responsibility is or mine, then you can understand why so many couples clash or break up, or so many business partners clash or break up, because they haven't had that very honest, direct conversation about the responsibilities, expectations, and roles.
100% agree. And there's so many juicy nuggets from this conversation, but we kind of landed the plane with one that we talked about earlier, with the hard conversations being inevitable. You might as well get good at them. It's so powerful.
Thank you, guys. Dude, you're so awesome. This has been so fun.
This has been really special. It's just the beginning of the friendship, right about 4 million now downloads. What's the best way for the community, and they're very loyal and engaging, to support you, Lisa?
Oh, yeah. If they like what they've heard. So I have my own show called Women of Impact that they can find on YouTube or on podcast, but also my book. Like, that's the thing. If you really want to learn everything that I just said from how do I actually do it? Very tactical, lined with beautiful stories, like the no BS stories that are really behind the scenes that me and my husband have gone through, that I've gone through in order to, you know, really create the life that I want. So that's the book, Radical Confidence, that can be bought anywhere books are sold.
And let's do this. It just came to mind. Sometimes I do this with the big guests. Whoever posts the best nugget from this episode and tags Lisa and I on Instagram, the best one, the one winner, Lisa will send an autographed copy of the book to. Deal?
Oh, shit. That's a deal. I love that.
Cool.
Yes.
How can I personally support you?
Oh, dude, just having me on and meeting you is so wonderful. Like, going back to like, what life do you actually want? This is the life I want, where I get to talk about empowerment. I get to talk to incredible humans who help me not just solidify my own thoughts, because I really do believe we speak to understand ourselves, not to be understood. And so I love doing these sorts of things because it helps me understand myself more. And then B, I love meeting new people like yourself who, you know, your story has already freaking inspired me. And, you know, like, it's already lit a fire under my ass. It's like, all right, he's showing up. Craig is the man.
Thank you so much. Hang out for 1 second. Lisa, I want you to know you're the definition of perspective, emotional intelligence, and growth. From taking your life experience to spreading positivity, light, and deep truths. You're a true visionary, role model, and beacon of hope for anybody coming up to their big goals and aspirations. I could personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless nuggets today.
Oh, thanks for having me, homie. We got to meet in person.
That was too much fun. That was great.
You're just so good.
Yeah.
It's one of these things, like, honestly, I can't believe you weren't doing this, right? When you meet someone that's actually living out their life.
Yeah. I wasn't always like it. I had it in me, but I guess I was looking for clarity, and then bang. And, you know, I know it's happened pretty quick, but I'm putting in the hours.
That's so amazing. And that's also the other thing, is that people don't see the hours you're putting in, right? And everyone kind of thinks. That's why even when I was writing the book, I was like, I don't want people to think it's easy for me. Like, this is so fucking hard.
Right.
And, you know, the validation piece with the book as well, that's one thing that just a lot of people said to me. Like, look, you work so freaking hard on the book. You spend so much of your life writing the book, like, intense. And what if it tanks? What if people are like, it's all right? You know, how do you make sure that that doesn't dent what you're doing, that doesn't impact your emotions, that doesn't deflate you? And then how do you, you know, make sure it's like the validation piece, that you feel good about yourself, that you've written a book and put it out. And so yeah, that was actually a really big piece for me, of like in real time processing all the things that I struggle with. And yeah, not anyway, so sorry that people didn't think that it was easy for me, because I still have massive doubt.
Yeah. And let's be honest, like I know your personality, like do a thing, do it well. Like you want it to be great. And we just signed the book deal too. And I just got momentum. I just started writing. I wanted to ask you, like, what was your process? Like, did you wake up a little bit earlier before the world, hit a rhythm? What did you do to really get in the zone?
Yeah, I segmented my business. So I basically looked at, before I started writing the book, I wanted to set myself up for success. So I took my calendar and I basically was like, all right, let's take the last couple of weeks, because sometimes you forget where your time goes. So I just took the last few weeks or month of what I'd done, and I was like, all right, what are the things I'm just not going to be available for? You said it earlier, right? What am I not being available for? And so instead of just cutting it out, I'm like, who's going to be available instead of me? So I started coming up with a plan of all the things that I do, all the things that I still want to make sure that I stay, that only I can do, and everything else I'm going to outsource. And then I would block days. And so I would say, cool, I've got the book for a week. I'm not taking any meetings. I'm not doing anything. This week, it's all in. Because my publisher, it was like, all right, you get the revision back. So like first stage, you have a deadline, right? And I was kind of doing what you did, like on Mondays, I'm going to do it on Tuesday, you know, but then once you get into the rhythm of drafts, that's when it becomes very insane. And so what I would do is I'd take all the week off, when I would know that they would give it to me. I would make sure I didn't have any meetings or any calls, and I just did my day. And that meant it's like I would wake up, I wouldn't set an alarm, I would still have my morning routine, because I didn't want to start my day on like anxiousness, like, oh my God, I gotta do the book.
Yeah.
And then I had a way of, as each revision started to get tighter, I don't know how you consume books, but I consume books Audible.
Same.
Like, okay. So me sitting there writing a book, I'm like, oh, I actually don't read books, but so many people do. And so I was like, there's so many different ways now that people consume books. Audible, read it, right? Or on
Kindle, yeah.
Kindle, exactly.
Kindle.
So I was like, okay, these are the three versions, right? Physical, digital, audio. So now I go, I need to make sure I've thought through how the experience is on all these different platforms. So number one, after I wrote it, every day I would do one version. So I would have the PDF of my book, I would have it printed, and I'm like, today I'm going to do a physical. And I sat there with my highlighter and my pen. I switched my phone off and I just read my book. I made all changes by hand or highlighter. I then made those changes into the Kindle. The next day, I read the whole book again on my laptop. I don't really have the Kindle, so I just read it. Cool. Now I've got that experience. Then the third day, I would export it into Speechify, which I don't know if you know what Speechify is.
No.
Oh my God. It is.
Tell me.
It's going to change your fucking life, dude. So literally, it's an app. I met with the founder because he started it because he had dyslexia. And he finds reading and listening is a way of him learning. So he developed this app that takes PDFs and does it in as if it's an Audible. So you can play it. So, you know, when you have to maybe read a book, I don't know actually how you do it, but sometimes I have guests on my show where they've got a book coming out, but it's not on Audible yet.
Yeah.
I
don't freaking have the time to sit and read the PDF of like 1,000 pages. Who's
Right.
got time for that shit? So it's a PDF. You export it into an app called Speechify. Now it's actually on my homepage. So Speechify, that one there.
Got it.
That's the logo.
The blue one.
Yeah. So you import it, and then you can choose speed. If you do the premium version, you can choose the speed. You can choose the accent. So what I would do is I would choose a British accent to reread the book back to me as if it was me.
That's awesome.
So that was hugely helpful. And every revision, I would always make sure I did it on all 3 platforms. That was huge for me. Also, I found it difficult to half. So to be half in business host mode and then be half in book mode. So I ended up just segmenting my days on today's book, today's YouTube, right? Like splitting those up as well.
Wait, so just to be clear, you speak to that book and then it runs it back in an accent to you?
No. So imagine you've got a PDF, so a written document.
Okay, so it's already written.
So in fact, here you go. I will. It's written as a PDF.
Okay.
Now, if you want to get fancy, you actually can do that. If you did a voice memo, if you wanted to, if I'm thinking through this now, if you did a voice memo, there's apps that you can export it, which gets it transcribed. And then if you took that transcription and put it into Speechify, I bet it could do that. It's obviously a little back and forth.
I love how you operate. There's always a way.
Oh, yeah. I love puzzles. I love
that's it.
Shit. And so, yeah, you just, I mean, it tells you how long you've been on it. I'm just trying to find a way that I can.
Do you guys ever come out to New York?
So the funny thing is, I'm coming out there this Sunday.
This Sunday?
It's for a day though, so it's I'm doing I've got a speaking gig, so I land at like midnight Sunday. Got the speaking gig on Monday, and then I come back on Tuesday. So I'm literally there for like.
Where's the speaking gig?
I'm staying at the Refinery Hotel in Manhattan.
Cool.
It's a speaking gig.
Next time you're in, you have a little bit more time. We should grab
Dude,
a coffee.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. Honestly, I'm literally flying in for this one thing, and I've got to meet my lit agent and my publisher, so it's gonna be a bit crazy. But I would love to. It's funny when I heard you in New York, I was thinking the same thing. But so Speechify, get Speechify. Just prepping for anything, it will speed up your entire life.
Okay.
So you import it in.
I can't wait to build a friendship with you. Can we exchange numbers?
Absolutely.
Shoot me a number. Shoot me a text. I'll give you my number.
Let's do it.